is the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights a tremendous responsibility in such troubled times? In the midst of the refugee crisis, 5 years after the start of the war in Syria, with new forms of war pushing Western democracies to the edge, how does he defend human rights? This is what we'll try to find out. Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein, welcome to the Global Conversation.
Thank you so much.
Let's begin with this controversial deal that Europe and Turkey are trying to implement. Greece has started deporting migrants and refugees back to Turkey. The plan is to do it massively. You're being very critical. Why?
There are 4 points that concern us. The first point concerns the processing centres becoming detention centres, and we already see this on the island of Lesbos. We're also concerned about the humanitarian conditions, about whether Turkey does indeed qualify as a safe third country. And finally, there seems to be an inherent contradiction between a desire to return all and individual assessment.
Syria's neighbours are bearing a huge burden, and nearly 5 million people have fled Syria. Most of these people are living in Turkey, but also in Lebanon and in your country, Jordan. About 2 months ago, King Abdullah of Jordan said the dam is going to burst. What did he mean?
If you look at the debt ratio, the debt to GDP ratio, it is increasing because of this responsibility that has been given to the neighboring countries, whether it be in particular Lebanon or Jordan. And I think the feeling is that this is grossly unfair. The conflict has lasted now for 5 years.
5 years.
And the responsibility for ending these sorts of conflicts falls principally on the UN Security Council, where you have 5 member states who have a special responsibility. That mechanism put into place after the Second World War to prevent these conflicts has not been successful in the case of Syria, and has led to the exporting of ISIS from Syria to Iraq, has led to this outflow of refugees.
Are you saying that it's because the UN Security Council hasn't been able to agree on a stance that the situation is what it is today in Syria?
Well, the Security Council has a special responsibility to ensure that conflicts of this nature that can be centrifugal, that can be very dangerous, and that they can drag in many players, which is what Syria has done, be brought to an end. And clearly the fact that it hasn't over the last 5 years is a demonstration that the Security Council has failed.
Well, you were the first Muslim to be appointed High Commissioner for Human Rights, and there are growing tensions towards the Muslim community in Europe because of these terror attacks in the name of God. And even though I know and you know that this bloodshed has nothing to do with religion, Muslims are being looked at with growing suspicion in the West. Considering this, what would be your message to the Muslims of Europe?
Yeah, I think a more careful understanding of developments would show that these groups, these takfiri groups, have targeted Muslims, other Muslims, in numbers that would dwarf the non-Muslims, with the exception of certain groups in Iraq, for example. But the takfiris, whoever they believe doesn't share their ideology, is considered an apostate and is not fit for life. And this is what the Islamic world has had to confront almost before Europe. And clearly we have to do more in the Islamic context, clearly. But what we need also is for Europe to very carefully understand that painting with a broad brush produces very terrible results. And European history is filled with examples of this, and I don't need to point them out.
The fight against impunity is one of your big challenges, and you were very committed to the creation of the International Criminal Court back in 2002. 14 years after, tell me if I'm wrong, I think only about 3 people have been convicted, and all these convictions and almost all ongoing investigations only concern one continent, Africa. Why?
You have to understand how the court works. The court works on the basis of jurisdiction, which can only be obtained if a country joins, or if the Security Council makes the referral.
So is the court's scope limited by the fact that many countries did not recognize it?
Yes. Yes, or the Security Council is unwilling to refer a case. And for that reason, then you don't have jurisdiction. When we first agreed on the statute, I think we felt that the world would change overnight. We felt it was such a major step forward toward ending impunity that the world would change overnight. Looking back, one understands that this takes a long time before the political leaderships around the world understand that there cannot be unrestrained exercise of power, that there is a limit to how you conduct military operations, that there is no willingness to agree to amnesties on the part of the Human Rights Office or other parts of the UN when trying to find a peace deal, for example.
Let me ask you a very concrete question with a concrete example. Syria not recognizing the International Criminal Court, is there any chance that, for instance, Bashar al-Assad might be judged by this court Monday?
There is a chance, and I think it could well happen. We can never say that all these people who are thought to have been the authors of crimes will escape justice, because we've seen in a number of cases people...
How?
We're collecting evidence. More and more agencies are collecting evidence, and in time we hope that the evidence would be brought to a court of law where the person standing accused will be put on trial.
The image of UN peacekeeping missions has been severely tarnished by many cases of sexual abuse in the past few years. Recently, more than 100 cases have been reported in the Central African Republic. The rule is to send back home the soldiers who commit such abuse and the whole unit. But there is still no obligation to judge these people.
Yeah.
Is this enough?
Well, I thank you for raising this. I mean, it is absolutely repugnant that there are people in whom victims, communities, vulnerable communities place their trust, peacekeepers, who stand accused of these sorts of horrific allegations. It is incumbent on the sending country, their country of nationality, to ensure that there is no impunity. The most the UN can do is remove them, basically, from service by sending them back.
So if these countries do not want to judge these people, there's nothing you can do about it?
Well, we can keep pressing them. Yes, the UN can say we won't take soldiers from your country anymore and put pressure like that. But ultimately, it's they who have to realize that the responsibilities return to them.
Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.